Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the Tin Hifi T7, and these are my honest audiophile impressions. I want to thank Tin Hifi for sending over the T7 for a review. To greatly appreciate it. Tin Hifi, you rock. Alright, so the Tin Hifi T7. This will set you back $200 from your bank account. It is a 10mm ultra-linear gold-plated diaphragm dynamic driver configuration. It has 22 ohms of impedance and 112 decibels of sensitivity with a frequency response range of 10 Hz to 20 kHz. The Tin Hifi T7 comes in this gray box. You get a little bit of branding on the front, and it says a flagship dynamic driver hi-fi. And then on the back, you just get a little bit of contact information. Sliding off the sleeve, which is kind of a snug fit, you get this gray box with a 7 on it, kind of nice looking, and then it looks like an envelope. You open it up, and there's an area for the T7s to sit. Set that to the side, and you have an area for a carrying case and some accessories. Show those to you. So the carrying case is square, and it's black, and it says Tin Hifi on the front. You have a nice zipper, very well protected, and you're going to hold your T7s very nicely. It does take up a little bit of room in a bag. Open it up, and you have plenty of room for the accessories. And those accessories are something a little bit different than what you normally get. You get a carrying strap for your carrying case, and it just clips on. And there you go. And then you get tips and a few accessories. The tips that you get are pretty standard. And then the other accessory that you get is a swappable termination, because the cable that it comes with is swappable termination with 3.5 and 4.4. The tips that you get are a selection of silicone and also foam tips. So the foam tips look like this, and they're pretty standard, nothing too special. And then you get two types of silicone tips. You get these red silicone tips, and these are the ones that I preferred. The stem is a little bit more firm, and they also have a little bit less of a wide opening. The black ones are a little bit wider, but also are a little bit more grape shaped, but aren't quite as firm in the stem. And I just found that I liked both, but I preferred the red stemmed ones. They just fit me a little bit better, and I noticed that I didn't have quite as much of a like a brightness up top as I do with the black ones. And then you get the T7. T7s are very nice looking. They're kind of a rectangular-ish angled. You got wood faceplate, gold, L and R on the backside to tell you which is which. A little bit of a rounded shape on the back, but it is smooth. It is not stepped. Not too much of an angle, and a decent nozzle length. Overall, they feel nice, and they look very nice. They feel quite durable. They are a little bit on the heavy side. Cable connects with the dreaded MMCX connector, and it has nice ear hooks, good tension, and I find that it has just enough to hold in place without being too tight or too loose. They have good tension. And then it has a split, which the cinch doesn't really stay in place. It kind of wiggles loose over time. Very, very small split. And then you have a nice braid going to your termination, which is fairly small, with a twisted swappable termination, which is nice. There is little dots on each, so you just line that up, squeeze them together, and then twist on, and it holds secure. Cable's nicely built, feels good in the hand. It never really lost its curve, though. I wasn't able to get it to be completely straight. And it's a little bit stiff and does tangle somewhat. Fit and comfort. I found that the T7 is, for the most part, comfortable. It takes a little bit to kind of get into place in the ears just because of the smaller size, and the angles are a little weird. And, you know, test out different tips and it'll fit a little bit better. But once you have it in place, they just kind of disappear. Now, that weight I do find can cause a little bit of fatigue over time. In about an hour, hour and a half or so, I have to take a little bit of a break just to let my ears kind of rest and relax, and I can go at it again listening to music. I also find that I have to point them fairly far forward, or else the stem for the cable kind of touches the top of my ears, which I do not care for. And also, I don't get a good seal that way. As far as sealing out of outside noises, they do a pretty good job with isolation. Probably somewhere about 55 to 60% of outside noises being blocked. When it comes to normal sounds around the house, the TV being on, people talking to you, lower sound appliances, don't really hear them and really struggle to carry on conversations. But louder things, vacuum cleaners and coffee grinders, things like that, I still was able to kind of hear a little bit. They were muffled. So it's not the best at noise isolation, but they do a pretty good job. The Tin Hifi T7 is fairly easy to drive. 22 ohms of impedance and 112 decibels of sensitivity. Pretty much anything will drive them. Even lower powered dongles I found really got the T7 loud. The T7 wasn't very picky as to what it was paired with, other than things that were more towards the colder, analytical leaning side of things. Those sources brought out a few tendencies that I didn't care for too much on the T7, and that was the upper mid-range and lower treble region was just a little too accentuated, and at times could become a bit on the brittle side and a little bit on the too cold side. And so I preferred them to be on a little bit more of a just plain neutral or a little bit warmer leaning sources. They did scale with a little bit more power. I did find that putting them on a source with a balanced output brought out just a little bit more of the special sauce, but it's not something that was like you definitely have to run them balanced. But it definitely did bring out a few extra little details here and there. So how do the Tin Hifi T7 sound? I found that the Tin Hifi T7 is a unique sound signature. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it has a lot of critical listening aspects, but also has a little bit of a fun side to it. And that fun side comes out in the bass. So the bass has a nice amount of heaviness and a lot of wallop to it. It reaches down deep and it hits home and it drives home, but it's a driving home with quality, not necessarily quantity. So if you're looking for that bass head type of whoomph, you're not going to get it. But if you're looking for that type of bass that is very articulate and very detailed and nicely resolving and has good natural tone and timbre, you'll get that with the T7. The T7 reaches down into the sub bass and you get some rumble and grumble when called upon. And then the mid bass and the upper bass also have nice impact, punch, and slam. And they hit home nicely, but it's always well controlled and very detailed. It's a very articulate bass with good tone and timbre and nice natural fullness. But at the same time, it's not really a bass head, bass heavy type of IEM. It's a very bassy quality, not a bassy quantity. And then the mids have enough naturalism to them and enough of a body to them, but they are slightly lacking behind. They're not quite as heavy and hard hitting as the bass is, but the mids do have nice natural tone and timbre for the most part. there's an elevation in the upper mid-range that kind of is a little too much, and it kind of pushes things forward and can bring out some shoutiness and sibilance. And at times they can be a little bit too much, a little too exuberant in the mid-range. So if you're sensitive to around 2 to 5K range in the mid-range as being a little bit too much, the T7 may come across in that way. I found them to be borderline too much for me at times, depending on the source. As mentioned before, if you use a more neutral, analytical, cold-leaning type of source, that can bring out the sibilance and a little bit more of that shoutiness of the T7. But for the most part, they have nice air and good space in the mids, and everything gets its own little place. They also have nice tone and timbre. The instruments like strings and pianos and upper reaches of woodwind instruments and brass instruments at times can sound just a little bit on the verge of being screechy and a little bit too, just a little too exuberant in their inner energy. But for the most part, the mids have a nice natural tonality to them, even though it isn't quite as full sounding as the bass. Going into the treble extends nicely and there's good air and space throughout. But the lower treble, 5 to 8K, maybe a little bit farther, is a little bit too energetic at times. Like the upper mids, it can be just a little too exuberant, just a little too excitable, and at times can sound slightly hot. So if you're a little bit sensitive to lower treble presence, the T7 may be a little too much for your ears. But for the most part, I found that the T7 had a nice naturalism to it and a good sparkle and energy, nice bite, edge, and crispness. But using a source, just like the mids, using a source that's a little bit neutral, analytical, colder leaning will bring that out, and it'll get a little bit too, it'll get somewhat shimmery and a little bit glassy sounding at times, and it could be a little too much. It was on the verge for me. And then the soundstage of the T7 is really, really good. I found that the soundstage was very, very wide. It does a really nice job of giving you a broad, wide open sound. There's good imaging throughout, and it does a really good job of dissecting different venue sizes, small, medium, large, and going into the grand size. You get a big, wide open space with the T7, and you can track things across. It does a really nice job of following things from side to side. You can pick it apart. You can go, that's right there, and lock on and follow it. That's there, that moved in behind, that moved from side to side, that exited out, that entered in. That did really good. The T7 is very good at dissecting a stage. It also has pretty good depth and layering. I found on more complex tracks, even really bassy complex tracks, that the T7 stayed very well controlled and very defined. You could really pick apart the stage even when there was a lot going on, and you could follow it. It's a very locked on type of tracking. The detail retrieval and resolution of the T7 is also quite good. I found that for a $200 IEM, it sounded just as good or not better than a lot of $200-ish IEMs, and I never lacked anything. It showed me things that I hadn't heard or don't normally hear, and I would never went, where's the detail? Resolution is also very good, especially in the mids and in the bass. The treble is also really good, but those upper treble regions that were discussed can at times sound a little bit too forthright in its presentation. And then tone and timbre. I found that the tone and timbre is really very natural sounding in the bass. The mids, it's okay. It's just a little bit on the thinner side. And then the treble has moments also of being a little bit too thin and at times sounding just a little bit too sparkly, a little too exuberant. And it throws off the tonality just a little bit in the mids and in the treble. But for the most part, it's a pretty natural sounding IEM. The T7 Also does really good with gaming. I found that I enjoyed the T7 very much for gaming. And lately I've been playing NCAA Football 26 and Assetto Corsa Compensione and a few other games. And I just found that those games, even though it's more sports games and racing games, which are what I play, I was able to dissect what was going on around me, and I was able to determine where things were and what was placed. And you could hear the crowd chattering in football, and you could hear players yelling and things like that. And then in racing, I could easily place cars next to me. I could tell what was going on with my car, with the brakes squealing or the acceleration or tires, spinning or losing control. All that kind of stuff was very much accurate and easily to dissect. So it does a good job with gaming as well. So the Tin Hifi T7. I was sitting there listening to music and playing games and just going, I wonder what it really compares to, because $200 is a lot for a single dynamic, and there's not a whole lot of single dynamics in that price range. So what one is very similar, and the more I listened to it, I said, it's very similar to the Tanchjim Origin. Now, the Tanchjim Origin is slightly more expensive, and I find it to be a little bit more comfortable, even though it is heavier. I find that it just fits me slightly better because of the step up and a little bit longer of a nozzle. I find that the cable's not as nice, but sound-wise, I find that the Origin just has a little bit more naturalism to it. It's a little bit more even and cohesive throughout the bass, the mids, and the treble. It doesn't hit as hard in the bass, doesn't quite have as much of the heaviness to it, but the mids aren't quite as forward, and that lower treble region isn't quite as forward, and it's a little bit better controlled when it comes to the mids and the treble extensions. And when it comes to the details and the resolution, the Origin is just slightly refined, defined, and focused, just a little bit more than the T7. When it comes to the soundstage, the T7 is wider, but the Origin is slightly better with its placement and a little bit better with its depth and layering. So they're very, very close. If you're going to use one of these two as a monitor, I would choose the Origin. It just is a little bit more natural and a little bit better when it comes to the finer details, and it's just a little bit more accurate as a stage monitor. But if you want a little bit more of a fun side, maybe a little bit more of an energetic thing, presentation, something for gaming, something to kind of have a little bit more wallop in the sound, or maybe a little bit more energy up top and not to be quite as critical listening, I definitely would look at the Tin Hifi T7. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscription links and notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. Don't forget to check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information down there regarding how you can contact channel, follow channel, support channel. Speaking of supporting channel, I want to thank my supporters through Patreon and YouTube memberships and one-time gifts. Thank you very much for all that you give to the channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please check out the links down below. Also, don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video. Check out all the other links. There's information like gear rankings, music recommendations, and all kinds of other things listed down below. And lastly, don't forget to enjoy the music and that honesty is the best policy.